The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a mechanical hum that grated against my already frayed nerves. I stood in the sterile conference room, hands trembling slightly as they gripped the back of the chair before me. Across the table sat 3 executives, faces I'd once trusted, people who had promised me growth and opportunity when I first joined Titan Corp 5 years ago. Now, their expressions were cold, calculating, almost indifferent to the bomb they were about to drop. "Lyra," one of them said, his voice clipped and formal, "we've reviewed your performance over the past quarter." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle like lead in my chest. "Unfortunately, it hasn't met our expectations." I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. My mind raced through the countless late nights, the weekends sacrificed, the relentless drive to prove myself within these corporate walls. Expectations? What expectations? They hadn't given me clear goals or benchmarks for success. Not really. It felt like a setup from the start, but I refused to let myself believe it until now. "And so," another executive chimed in, her tone softer but no less final, "we're going to have to make some changes. Effective immediately, we'll be reducing your salary by 20%. Additionally," she hesitated, glancing at the others before continuing, "your position here is being eliminated." The air seemed to leave the room all at once. My knees wobbled, but I forced myself to stay upright, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Firing me? After everything I'd done for this company? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to tell them how unfair this was. But instead, I swallowed hard and managed a single question. "Why?" They exchanged glances again, clearly uncomfortable with the directness of my response. Finally, the third executive spoke up, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's not personal, Lyra. The market's tough right now. We need to cut costs where we can." Cut costs. Right. That was their excuse for everything lately, from layoffs to outsourcing jobs overseas. And yet, somehow, the higher-ups always seemed to find ways to pad their bonuses while the rest of us struggled just to keep our heads above water. As I walked out of that meeting, clutching the termination letter in my hand, anger began to simmer beneath the surface. This wasn't just about losing a job, it was about betrayal. These people didn't care about loyalty or hard work. They cared about numbers on spreadsheets and bottom lines. For years, I'd poured my heart into this place, believing the lies they fed me about career advancement and stability. Now I realized none of it mattered. I was expendable, but something inside me snapped that day. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was the realization that I couldn't rely on anyone else to define my worth. Whatever it was, it lit a fire under me, a burning determination to prove them wrong, to show them exactly what they lost when they underestimated me. That night, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. Tears streaked down my face, but I wiped them away angrily. Crying wouldn't fix anything. Action would. I thought back to all those hours spent brainstorming ideas during team meetings, ideas that were dismissed or credited to someone else entirely, ideas that could have changed things if only they'd been given a chance. One idea in particular kept nagging at me. It had started as a joke between colleagues, a sarcastic comment about how ridiculous corporate jargon sounded when executives spouted it during presentations. Someone had joked that we should write a book parodying all the absurd phrases and empty promises companies love to throw around. At the time, I laughed along with everyone else, never imagining it could actually become something real. But now, sitting there in the quiet darkness of my living room, the idea didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. In fact, it felt perfect. A way to channel my frustration into something productive, something meaningful, something that could stick it to every soulless corporation out there, including Titan Corp. I opened a blank document and started typing. The title came easily, Corporate Alchemy, Turning Bullshit into Gold. It was sharp, biting, and unapologetically honest. Exactly what I needed it to be. As the words flowed onto the page, I found myself laughing through my tears. Each sentence was cathartic, each paragraph a release of pent-up rage and disappointment. By morning, I had the rough outline of a manuscript and a renewed sense of purpose. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into writing with an intensity one hadn't felt in years. Every spare moment was devoted to fleshing out characters, crafting witty dialogue, and dissecting the absurdities of corporate culture. I drew inspiration from my own experiences, exaggerating situations and personalities to create a satirical world that felt both familiar and hilariously absurd. During the day, I scoured job boards and sent out resumes, pretending to play along with the charade of finding new employment. But deep down, I knew I wasn't looking for another office job. Not after what happened. Writing this book became my lifeline, an escape hatch from the toxic cycle of corporate servitude. When the first draft was finally complete, I hesitated. Publishing a book seemed daunting, especially for someone with zero experience in the industry. But then I remembered something my old college professor used to say: if you don't take risks, you'll never know what you're truly capable of. So I took a leap of faith and self-published Corporate Alchemy online. At first, nothing happened. Days turned into weeks, and sales trickled in slowly. I started to doubt myself, wondering if the whole endeavor had been a waste of time. But then, something unexpected occurred. A popular business podcast mentioned my book during an episode, praising its humor and insight. Overnight, downloads skyrocketed. Reviews poured in, praising the book's sharp wit and relatable content. People connected with it in ways I hadn't anticipated. Soon, I wasn't just selling copies. I was building a community. Readers reached out to share their own stories of corporate disillusionment, thanking me for giving voice to their frustrations. Some even offered suggestions for sequels or spin-offs. The more traction the book gained, the more empowered I felt. For the first time in my life, I was creating something entirely on my own terms. With royalties rolling in steadily, I began experimenting with other creative projects. Blog posts, short stories, even a YouTube series dissecting modern workplace trends. All inspired by the same irreverent spirit that fueled corporate alchemy. Each new venture brought fresh opportunities and challenges, pushing me further outside my comfort zone. Still, despite my growing success, I couldn't shake the lingering bitterness toward Titan Corp. Every time I checked my bank account and saw the steady stream of royalty payments, I thought about the executives who had fired me without a second thought. Did they realize how badly they'd miscalculated? Did they regret cutting me loose? One evening, as I scrolled through social media, I stumbled across a post from a former coworker. Apparently, Titan Corp was struggling financially. Layoffs were becoming commonplace, morale was at an all-time low, and rumors swirled about potential mergers or buyouts. Reading between the lines, it sounded like chaos behind the scenes. Good, I thought bitterly. Karma's a bitch. Yet, as satisfying as it was to see them flounder, part of me wondered if there was more I could do. Was there a way to turn my newfound platform into something bigger? Something that could challenge the very system that had failed me and countless others so spectacularly? The idea hit me like a bolt of lightning. What if I didn't stop at satire? What if I used my voice to advocate for real change? To expose the injustices of corporate greed and inspire others to fight back? The possibilities were endless, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. And so, as I closed my laptop that night, I made a decision. This was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity that I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about impact. I wanted to take everything I'd learned from my time at Titan Corp and turn it into something meaningful, something that could help others navigate the broken system I'd been crushed by. But how? The question lingered as I brewed my coffee, staring out the window at the gray sky. I started small. First, I created a newsletter called The Unbroken Brief, where I shared insights on workplace dynamics, personal growth, and strategies for surviving and thriving outside the traditional corporate structure. Each issue opened with a story, sometimes funny, sometimes raw, always honest. Stories like mine. Within weeks, subscribers began flooding in. Not just former colleagues or acquaintances, but strangers who resonated deeply with the content. People thanked me for articulating what they couldn't put into words themselves. But writing wasn't enough. I craved action, movement, disruption. So, I decided to host live discussions online under the banner, Breaking the Corporate Mold. At first, attendance was modest, a handful of curious readers logging in after work hours. But word spread quickly. These weren't your typical webinars filled with buzzwords and empty promises. No, these were real conversations about power imbalances, toxic leadership, and the courage it takes to walk away from environments that no longer serve you. Attendees came ready to share their own experiences, creating a space that felt less like a lecture hall and more like a support group. One evening, during one of these sessions, a woman named Rachel unmuted herself hesitantly. Her voice trembled as she recounted her own firing, a scenario eerily similar to mine. She'd been let go after nearly 2 decades with her company, dismissed without warning or explanation. "It's not just losing the job," she said, choking back tears. "It's losing a part of yourself. Like you failed somehow." Her words struck a chord with everyone in the virtual room, including me. For so long, I'd carried that same shame, believing I wasn't good enough, smart enough, valuable enough. Hearing Rachel speak reminded me why this fight mattered. This wasn't just about me versus Titan Corp anymore. It was about all of us standing together against systems designed to grind us down. Inspired by Rachel's bravery, I launched a podcast called Untethered, dedicated to amplifying voices often silenced in corporate spaces. Guests ranged from whistleblowers exposing unethical practices to entrepreneurs building businesses rooted in equity and transparency. One episode featured an IT specialist who had secretly documented systemic discrimination within his organization for years before finally speaking out. Another highlighted a single mother turned freelance writer whose side hustle became her full-time career after being laid off unexpectedly. Their stories inspired listeners and me to rethink what success really means. As my platform grew, so did my confidence. I began receiving invitations to speak at conferences and workshops across the country. Standing on stage, microphone in hand, I told my story openly for the first time. I didn't sugarcoat the pain or gloss over the anger. Instead, I leaned into it, letting every emotion fuel my message. By the end of each talk, audiences erupted into applause. Not because I was offering easy solutions, but because I was validating their struggles. We were in this together. Meanwhile, corporate alchemy continued to gain traction. Royalties poured in steadily, allowing me to invest in bigger projects. With the financial freedom I now enjoyed, I founded a nonprofit initiative called Reclaim Your Worth, aimed at providing resources and mentorship to individuals transitioning out of toxic workplaces. Whether it was resume building workshops, mental health counseling, or grants for aspiring entrepreneurs, the program gave people tools to rebuild their lives on their own terms. And yet, despite all the progress, there were moments when doubt crept in. Late nights spent drafting emails or editing videos left me exhausted, questioning whether any of this would truly make a difference. Was I naive to think I could dismantle decades of entrenched corporate culture? Could one person, even someone with a growing following, really change the game? Then I'd scroll through messages from supporters, read testimonials from those who credited my work with helping them leave dead-end jobs or start new ventures, and remember why I kept going. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts somewhere. And maybe, just maybe, I could be part of that spark. Back home, I found solace in routine. Mornings began with yoga and meditation, grounding myself before diving into another day of advocacy. Afternoons were reserved for creative projects, writing articles, recording podcast episodes, brainstorming ideas for future initiatives. Evenings brought quiet reflection, journaling thoughts and dreams for the future. Life felt fuller than ever before, even amidst the chaos. Still, I couldn't ignore the elephant in the room. Titan Corp. Every news article detailing their financial woes felt like a bittersweet victory. Part of me reveled in their downfall, imagining executives scrambling to save face while employees suffered the consequences of poor decisions made long before my departure. Yet another part of me wondered if I should confront them directly, not out of malice, but to show them what they'd lost, to remind them that cutting corners and devaluing human potential comes at a cost, one they might never fully recover from. One afternoon, scrolling through LinkedIn, a habit I'd sworn off months ago, I noticed a familiar name pop up in my feed. Marcus Hale, the lead executive who delivered the termination letter that fateful day. His post celebrated Titan Corp's resilience in navigating challenging times, accompanied by a photo of him smiling smugly at some gala event. My blood boiled instantly. Before I could stop myself, I drafted a response. Initially, it was sharp and biting, a scathing critique of his leadership and the company's failures. But as I reread the words, I realized that wasn't who I was anymore. Revenge wasn't the answer. Growth was. So I rewrote it, focusing instead on lessons learned and paths forward. Marcus, I wrote, while Titan Corp navigates its current challenges, I hope leadership reflects on the importance of valuing employees not as expendable assets, but as integral partners in success. Those who feel empowered create innovation. Those who feel abandoned seek opportunity elsewhere and often thrive beyond expectation. I hit send before second-guessing myself. Almost immediately, notifications began rolling in. Likes, comments, shares. Friends and followers applauded my professionalism, while former colleagues reached out privately to express admiration for my restraint. As for Marcus, silence. Predictable. Days later, however, I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line read simply, "From Titan Corp." My heart raced as I opened it, half expecting legal threats or defensive rebuttals. Instead, I found a brief note. "Lyra, your recent comment gave us pause. While we may not agree on everything, your perspective is undeniably valuable. If you're open to discussing ways we can improve moving forward, please let us know. Sincerely, Marcus Hale." Staring at the screen, I felt a mix of emotions: surprise, skepticism, curiosity. Could this be genuine, or was it another PR stunt? Either way, it presented an opportunity. An opportunity to step back into the arena, not as a victim seeking vengeance, but as a leader advocating for change. What I didn't realize then was that responding to that email would set off a chain reaction neither of us could have anticipated. The email from Marcus sat in my inbox for days. I read it over and over, each time trying to decipher its tone. Was it sincere or manipulative? A genuine olive branch or a calculated move to save face? Ultimately, I decided it didn't matter. What mattered was the chance to turn this moment into something bigger than myself. I responded with measured words. "Marcus, if you're truly interested in meaningful change, I'm willing to discuss how Titan Corp can rebuild trust with its employees and foster a culture of empowerment rather than exploitation. But know this, I won't compromise my values or settle for empty promises. Let me know if you're ready to have that conversation. Sincerely, Lyra." His reply came within hours, confirming a meeting at a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown. The day of our sit-down arrived, and as I walked in, I spotted him immediately. He looked older than I remembered, his once smug demeanor replaced by something closer to humility. For a brief second, I felt a pang of sympathy. Running a failing company must weigh heavily on anyone. We ordered coffee and dove straight into the conversation. At first, he tried to frame things diplomatically, talking about market pressures and difficult decisions. But I interrupted him, cutting through the corporate jargon. "Marcus," I said firmly, "let's skip the spin. You fired people like me, not because we weren't performing, but because it was easier than addressing systemic issues within the company. That kind of behavior doesn't just hurt individuals. It destroys morale and erodes loyalty. And now you're paying the price." He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of resignation. "You're right. We messed up. Big time. And honestly, Lyra, seeing your success, it's made us reflect on what we lost when we let you go." For a moment, I allowed myself to feel vindicated, but only for a moment. This wasn't about gloating. It was about solutions. "So, what are you going to do about it?" I challenged him. "Are you ready to actually listen to your workforce instead of treating them like cogs in a machine?" To his credit, Marcus nodded. "That's why I reached out. I want to make things right for the company, for the employees, and yes, even for myself. I need help, Lyra. Real help." Over the next hour, we outlined steps Titan Corp could take to begin repairing the damage. Implementing transparent communication channels, creating employee advisory boards, offering professional development programs, and ensuring fair compensation practices. By the end of the meeting, we had a tentative plan in place, and an agreement that I would consult with them as they worked toward lasting change. Months later, Titan Corp began to transform. Employees reported feeling more valued and engaged. Layoffs slowed, replaced by initiatives aimed at retaining talent. Public perception shifted too, as news outlets covered their efforts to prioritize people over profit. It wasn't perfect, change never is, but it was progress. As for me, I continued building my own empire. Corporate Alchemy became a bestseller, translated into multiple languages. My nonprofit expanded globally, reaching thousands of people seeking to reclaim their worth. Speaking engagements took me around the world, where I inspired audiences with stories of resilience and reinvention. And through it all, I remained steadfast in my mission to dismantle toxic systems and empower others to rise above them. One evening, as I stood on stage at a packed auditorium, I reflected on how far I'd come. From the fluorescent-lit conference room where my career ended to this moment of triumph, every setback had led me here. Every failure had been a stepping stone. Every wound had healed into strength. Before wrapping up my speech, I shared one final thought with the crowd. They tried to silence me, to diminish me, to erase me. But they underestimated the power of resilience. Remember this, no matter how hard life knocks you down, you always have the choice to get back up stronger. You are not defined by your defeats. You are forged by them. The audience erupted into applause, cheers echoing through the hall. As I stepped off stage, someone handed me a bouquet of flowers. Attached was a small card. It read, "Thank you for showing us what's possible. Marcus." I smiled, tucking the card into my pocket. Revenge was sweet, sure, but redemption was sweeter. And so, my journey came full circle, not with bitterness, but with purpose. Not with anger, but with hope. Because sometimes the greatest victories aren't about tearing others down. They're about lifting everyone up, including yourself.